So I was standing at the bus stop yesterday at a place in the middle of Bristol city centre, which is, I love Bristol as a city, but it's a bit of a grim part of it. It's one of those very central areas in a city where people are kind of rushing around, going to work. There's a lot of people just sort of very much just in like inside their own heads or staring at their phones. And it's normally just a bit of a grim place. But there were some musicians playing there yesterday, kind of in the centre of this very busy and unconscious place where people aren't really aware of what's going on around them. And I was just noticing the difference that music was making on everyone, as compared to times when I've stood there before and also just been completely in my own head and not really paying attention to what's going on, which is very easy to do in a city, I think. But the music was just uplifting everyone. You could just sense it in the energy in the air, and in my own energy as well. I found myself just tuning into it and really letting it sort of move through my own energy, and just it made me more able to just pay attention to what was going on around me generally, and look at people's faces, look at the texture of things, notice the light and the shadow and other sounds as well. There's fountains there. I was noticing the water. So when thinking about how art can change the world, I just had an example of that yesterday when I was standing at this bus stop, and noticing how that music did change things in a small way. I think when we think about art changing the world, we're thinking about the kind of massive works of art, throughout history that everyone knows, like I don't know, a piece of art by Andy Warhol or something, or a piece of music by Beethoven. But it's not necessarily that. It's just the way that it can change the world in very small ways, small moments.
Yeah, it's a nice story. Yeah, I was watching some videos of Carl Jung over the last couple of nights in the bath. I read Carl Jung when I was a teenager, fairly obsessively for a few years, and it's always remained with me. Obviously, he has contributed so much. He invented introvert and extrovert, for example. He was also someone who was very tuned into this idea of the introvert being someone who dreams, and dreaming is just as real in our reality. It's just as solid and real as what we regard as external objects in our environment, right? So, for example, the sofa that I'm sat on right now, okay, is as real as the dreams that I had this morning, okay? Now, we might not scientifically be able to measure them, like in terms of our dreams, our visions, our ideas at this point of technology, but they are as real as the external, right? So that's really gives a window into the introvert versus extrovert. And he did talk about, and this is something that is still perhaps perceptually true is that we tend to value the extrovert because of the way that our society has been created that way, or we've been conditioned that way, or whatever. But dreams are real. And the more that I develop in my own practice and my own work, the more I am able to tune into a type of information that is available to all of us and that we access all the time through dreams, visions, and ideas. Jung called this the collective unconscious. And according to other philosophical works, and also esoteric traditions, and again, this isn't scientific because science hasn't caught up to this, but Joseph Campbell believed that the symbols, the archetypes, the symbols, the ideas, the images existed before we did. So we actually live in a universe of symbols and archetypes and ideas, and as human beings we tune into them and we are able to make them physical. So for example, we live in a society of dreams. So everything was a dream. This sofa was a dream. This way that this building was built was a dream in someone's mind. Streets, cars, were once ideas in someone's mind. They were once dreams, and then they came through the psychological, through the energetic, and into objective reality. So I think that's a really good example of what art and creativity is the world. It is the way that we view each other, the way that we see ourselves, the way that we communicate. Everything is art, creativity, and ideas.
And everyone has creativity in them. I watched a good interview actually with Gabor Mate, the psychologist, writer, and he was saying about how everyone has creative expression in them, and everyone needs to express, and what is in us has to come out. But creativity can come out in lots of different areas, not necessarily just in the way we're talking about it, where it's sitting down to create a piece of art. It can come out in all kinds of ways. You can be creative in the way that you do your gardening, or he used even athletic expression as a form of creativity. So it is an expression, I think, that all human beings share and all human beings need. But we get so bogged down in these ideas of, not being creative or not being good at something if we were to try it. I think that's another thing that stops people from creating. It's like, oh, what's the point? I'm not good at that, so I won't even try. We associate potential failure at something as being a measure of self-worth. So yeah, I do think it's part of what makes us human, creativity, and that process of dreaming and thinking, and then coming to the table to create, and then putting our expression out into the world, and then it going on its own journey, and developing even further when it's outside of us.
Yeah, it's going on like all the time, whether we think that it is or not, it is. And I think what's useful is to like separate it from people, and just see people's as the conduit for what happens, the portal, the river, the water in which the ideas travel down. It's not like we don't have to take personal responsibility for it, and it's like it's less ego that way, because the problem is the ego, right? The left brain is constantly trying to maintain a type of control over our true selves, the self, right, which is our body, which has infinite knowledge and infinite creativity, and the left brain is trying to control that. That's what you were saying is a good example of that, right? Because it's like, I am not creative, right? It's like, I am is a statement of identity made by the left brain, because really, like, I am, it just is I am. There is no follow on to that statement. I am is just, that is it. So especially when someone says I am not, the reason that they are saying I am not is because there is low self-esteem, or there's a belief that's been basically communicated to that person throughout their lives by others, by society, by their experiences, which have given them this limitation. So I think the role of art and music and writing stories and expression is to liberate us from that, and to be able to give us the knowledge that we already have, right? So it's like, it's bringing out knowledge from inside of us, right? Because it's not like information comes from outside of us, right? It's like, it's in us already, and it's like what our lives are here to do is to help us realize what's inside of us. There's some really interesting spiritual practices that I've been doing that go all across lots of different types of meditation and energy work. And essentially what you're doing is that you're like, so there's a meditation where where there's a full moon, and you're meditating on the full moon to connect with the energy of the full moon, right? And essentially what's happening is that you're not actually taking the energy from the full moon. The energy from the moon is inside you already, and what you're doing in the practice is that you're realizing it, you're opening it, you're seeing that subtle energy is in you, because you are the universe. The truth is that you are the entirety of this existence, right? You are that. So it's like the work is to realize this. So we're talking about art that changes the world, and it's a really good experience that you shared of like consciousness on that bus stop, right? Because it's like everyone's just tapped into the hypnotic ego of Broadmead, right? Which is just low consciousness and high left brain saboteur voices. Everyone's thinking about how they're a prisoner, how they have no hope in life, that they must consume, right? So you bring some beautiful music in there, and it takes you out. It pulls you out of this gunk that everyone is like housed in, like energetically, and it brings you out, and it's like out of that mist is the experience of consciousness, which is what we're all here to do. This is our work. This is why we're here, is to realize ourselves on this level of being awake. And it's like, that's what this stuff is for. It's to wake you up.
Yeah. It's interesting what you're saying about the external, the moon, because I think the ego is very focused on the external, isn't it? And how we're perceived by other people, and potential danger that is out there, or failure that is out there. And I run into this all the time when I'll have an idea for something and I'll be filled with energy, for a new idea. I'm sure many artists who are listening to this understand this feeling that you get when you are seized with a new idea. It's like it just comes out of nowhere. And you just feel like you've got limitless energy for it and you can't wait to get started on it, and you start, jotting down notes, or however it is that you start to realize the idea, kind of letting it come to the surface and letting it have, take on a new form. It grows new branches and new little sections of it kind of open up as you let it unfold. But then I find what often happens is my ego steps in, and I almost start to identify with the idea or the potential idea. I identify with it. And again, going back to that interview with Gabor Mate, he was saying he had this crisis with the last book that he wrote, where he was starting to identify with it and basically allow his own sense of self-worth to become sort of tied up in the idea. And he started to then just freak out, oh no, what if the book comes out and it's a failure? That means that I am a failure, that's a reflection of me. And I find that, when this happens to me, it's like the left brain stepping in to show you what's going to happen, when this idea fails, and coming up with reasons for, why you shouldn't pursue this idea, or why it shouldn't be realised, or why it's a terrible idea, or like all the things that are wrong with it, all the books out there, or whatever it is, whatever form you're working in. For me, it's often books. I'll go research other books or stories that are similar to the idea that I have, to get a sense of what the market is like. And then that's when it's like, oh, wow, other people have already done this idea and they've done it way better than you could ever do it. So, what's the point? And it's so sad, because it's like that initial energy that you have for the idea is just, it's like a tap being turned off. At that point when you start to identify with the work and see it as a reflection of who you are, I think there's a certain level of healthy detachment that needs to happen when you're creating something, making it external. And the more external it becomes, the more you're kind of detaching yourself from it, until eventually, when the idea is realised and finished, then you're letting it go, and the outcome of that art is completely unimportant. It doesn't matter if anyone ever reads it. It doesn't matter if it gets published or receives 1 million downloads or whatever it is. But yeah, I think we're so outcome focused in society that obsession with outcomes can just be a way to immediately, like, it's like throwing a bucket of water onto a fire when you start obsessing over the outcome and how that outcome is going to be a reflection of who you are.
Yeah, it's just fear. It's just fear, basically. When we were kids, the world was a scary, unknown place, and these voices came about to help us deal with that. So that's the origins of those left brain entities, and they stay with you. You can't get rid of them completely. They're always going to be there, but they're not you. But again, what is you? Right? Because I think, like, having an idea about, like, what am I? Who am I? What am I? So, really, there needs to be spirituality. Maybe you don't like that word. We don't have to use spirituality. A deep knowledge of self, because that's always something that you can tap into you know, because we're all by default have experiences like you're talking about of like, you know, my work's terrible, I'm a failure, why bother, everyone's better than me, I don't know anything, right? I mean, that's just normal thing to happen, but I think it's important to call your deeper self on the phone and just check in. I've been doing this really good practice, somatic descent practice, Reginald A. Ray. I've just been doing their Audible programs. He's an incredible meditation teacher. It's been quite profound and deep and transformational. I recommend it if you're interested in finding out who you are, and also having access to the body, right? Because it's like when we're in our body, the voices aren't in our body. Okay, they're, you know, they exist in our head. So if you can get into your body, that really helps. That's been kind of an amazing tool for me to be able to cope, because I think when you're doing a path in life which is authentic, like, you know, you're making something which is real, you know, you're not you know, you're not doing it for some superficial reason, right? Then that can be a lot of pressure at times when the saboteurs kick in, when your left brain is like ruling the roost. You know, you can have freak out moments. I mean, like a lot of days I'm like, I feel difficult, like, you know, it's hard more than it's not. So I think having a tool to be able to go in, and also the body is where you're drawing your energy from, right? I mean, you mentioned when you were talking that your energy just got turned off like a tap when the saboteurs are attacking you, right? But the infinite connection to all energy in the universe is inside your body. So your body is like basically rooted into the cosmos. So it's like that's where the supply is, right? That's where the sea is, you know, of energy. So like having an awareness of that and the ability to be able to tap into that is important, I think, because, you know, we all get dragged down at times, and I think it's really important to be able to pull yourself out of that, and just connect with what is real, because the voices aren't real. They're not you. That's not who you are. And I think what they're trying to do is make you identify with them, and they're trying to trick you into believing that that's who you are. And it's like saboteur music sounds like everything, right? It's like it's pleasing to whatever the scene is. It's just copying other people. It's boring. It's lifeless. It's dead inside. But the real powerful transformational works are related to the connection to the body, and that is true. And when we experience it, it brings us to our body. And that's your story again in the centre of Bristol in Broadmead, waiting for the bus. It pulls you out of the left brain fog and moved you inside of your existence.
Yeah, I think there's another thing as well, you know, when creating, and it's something that our brains like to do, and it's a loop that, you know, I think we all get stuck in sometimes, where it's like projecting yourself into the future, and thinking of the creative work as the finished thing, you know, in its finished form, and then imagining how audiences are going to perceive it and becoming focused on that. And I think that's the root of that, you know, the kind of music that you're talking about, where it's just about pleasing an audience. It's like that's all it is. That artist is just projecting themselves into the future and thinking about it in terms of how it's going to be received and how it's going to fit into the scene, the modern scene, rather than allowing it to be a true expression of who they are. And yeah, I think this detachment thing that I was talking about earlier, like healthy detachment, needs to be balanced with that, true expression of self. And that's, like you were saying, that's what the truly great pieces of art are. If we can just get out of our own heads and get out of our way in order to actually create. Because I think as well there is a bit of a pressure of, the episode is called, using art to change the world. And I think that can be a pressure too. Like when you sit down to create something, it's like, oh, I really want this piece of work to change the world and help people. And that is also the ego, it's slightly more disguised because you're coming at it with like a noble purpose of like, oh, this is really going to like help people in the way that I was helped, when I was a teenager and I sat down to listen to this piece of music and it changed my whole life. This work is also going to do that for other people. But again, that is also just the ego, because you're kind of abusing the process in a way by thinking that way, thinking in that kind of self-righteous, self-important way of thinking of art as some kind of, I don't know, like, it's difficult, isn't it? Because art is, I don't really know what I'm trying to say. I think that can just add pressure when you're thinking about your art changing the world, rather than just sitting down and saying, this is just an expression of who I am right now in this moment. I have something that's inside me that needs to come out, and it's going to just come out in this form. And completely detaching yourself from any kind of outcome. I think that's an issue that I definitely struggle with. My mind just wants to pull me into the future, thinking about how this work is going to be perceived in the world, and if it's going to make me money, or if it's going to make people think of me as a real writer, that horrible expression that is often thrown around, rather than just, this is just me expressing myself in the moment. It might be that no one ever reads this other than me, and that's okay.
But that's still an expression of the left brain saboteurs, even if it's like I'm telling yourself, oh, I'm just going to be in the moment. Okay. I mean, they've got so many tricks up their sleeve, the saboteurs. So anything that's a voice in your head isn't who you are. That's useful information, I think, because it's like, if you're thinking, then you're not in the flow state. You're not connecting with what you're doing if you're thinking. So
but I think even that is like judging yourself for thinking, which is also saboteur. It's like, oh, I shouldn't be thinking right now. I should just be present.
No. I'm not saying a voice in your head telling you that you shouldn't be thinking. I'm saying thinking is not part of the flow state. Thinking is not part of the flow state. I'm making that's a statement. I'm not saying that isn't a saboteur speaking. Right? Because it's like when you're in the flow, you're not thinking. Can we agree on that?
Yeah.
Right? So, like, and again, this comes back to the left brain, right brain. Okay, so your right brain, intuition, creativity. And if I've done a lot of like self-development with all of my self-development work is based on connecting with the right brain. We live in such a left brain dominated world, so the right brain is where it's at, and basically that's feeling. So the right brain communicates to you through feeling, through images, through a sense of something. It is not a voice. So there's a good indicator of where you're at. Okay, so if you're, for example, like, I did some writing yesterday, and like a lot of the time, with writing, it's like, but most of the time you're not in the flow state, right? But it's like you do it enough and you do go there, and there was a point yesterday when I was writing a certain part of this piece, and I felt energy just surging through my body, and it was just like I wasn't in my head going, oh, I can really feel energy surging in my body. It's only reflecting back on it now that I can see what was happening, but it was just an energetic experience. So that's a right brain state. So, and there is value to the left brain, right? I mean, it's there, it's an analytical tool, so it's like it's constantly analyzing, and there are times when that is useful. The rational analytical angle can be useful, of course, but it's just making sure that when you're in the creation part of the process, that you're engaging within a more physical, sensational experience. And it's like we're talking about meditation, and again, we're talking about, basically, we are all here on this planet to ease suffering. And what does that mean, ease suffering? Well, it means that we're pulling ourselves out of this gunk, and that we're liberating ourselves, and that we're awakening to the truth that we are the totality of the cosmos, and that we are here for a reason, and that we have divinity within us, and that we are here to express it. And I really like what you're saying about it not being about outcomes, because it's about process, because the process of the creative process is a process, and within that process of creating work, we are growing, we are liberating, we are doing difficult things, we are challenging ourselves, and we are becoming higher frequency beings through the process. And the universe is here to help us, and it might be that, like, whatever you work on fails, brackets fails, and that might be what you need, because when you go back to do it again, you've learned, and then you do something, and then that fails, and then you come away, and then you come back and do it again, and then that fails, and then you go back, and that's the life. That is your life forever until you die. Fail, again. And sometimes you want to scream, but you go back and you do it, and you keep on doing it. And that is the great privilege of our lives. And I mean, it's hard. It is super hard. But you're in it anyway. You're in it anyway, okay? Like, you're here, okay? Until you die, you're here. So it's not really that different from what you have to experience anyway. You might as well do it in an authentic way. So for me, I think, like, the art is an expression of this. It's fundamentally what it is. It's an expression of life. Music is life. Music is the cosmos. Music is the interaction of the planetary systems, the cycles. It's a reflection of the veil of samsara. In Buddhism, they describe the veil of samsara as being this infinite loop that is continuously, the cycles of the day, the cycles of the year, the cycles of your mood, of your menstrual cycle, your hormonal cycle. So, the feeling of art and music is an expression of that